Theodore Roosevelt was an incredibly wealthy New Yorker with a massive ego and personality, who became president largely due to his own myth-making. Yet, reading this book, I constantly thought to myself, Theodore Roosevelt is everything Donald Trump is not. Where in their similar early lives did their paths diverge?
Well, we've got a lawnmower and a chainsaw going across the way, and to which I say, leave it as it is. But to your question, Trump and Roosevelt had a lot in common. They were New York born, they ate ravenously, they were known to be kind of bullies, and they actually both had small hands. That's a true thing. But the differences are vast. Starting with Roosevelt's ability to grow and his powers of empathy. I'm not sure the Biden presidency is the answer, but it's certainly the start, hopefully, of some healing. But what we really need is a Rooseveltian figure, someone who can bring energy and excitement, not just to the love of wilderness, but to the climate change fight. Just as Roosevelt took on the trusts and took on the railroads, we need someone who can take on the fossil fuel industries and somebody who can create a vision that we can all follow so that we can live a viable and sustainable future.
Why is Roosevelt so vital at this moment?
Of all the consequences of the crash and burn years of the Trump presidency, it may be that the most monumental in many senses isn't taking place in our fiery streets or the halls of Congress, but in a district court in the District of Columbia. That's where the fate of the Antiquities Act is being decided. The Antiquities Act gives a president the power to preserve land. What Trump has done is subvert the saving of previous presidents. And if the court decides that that is legal, all previous land saved is up for grabs. Anything goes.
The American Museum of Natural History just took down its famous front-facing statue of Theodore Roosevelt. Isn't this the wrong time for Teddy?
I think Teddy would have agreed with taking down the statue. There's no doubt Roosevelt was flawed. He was a complex, messy character. He was an imperialist. He had chauvinistic overtones. But he also evolved as a politician till by the end, when he ran as a bull moose candidate, he had a platform that would have made Bernie blush. He was a great reader. His powers of empathy were extraordinary, and he grew and grew as president. Not only that, he didn't want to be a politician when he was young. He didn't want to be a soldier. He wanted to be a naturalist like Charles Darwin. So it's perfect that the museum, a compensatory gesture, has named their Hall of Biodiversity after Roosevelt. He understood in a way that few presidents, maybe no presidents, have, that there's a world beyond the human world, a world beyond the anthropocentric, a world of nature and of wilderness.
How do you reconcile Roosevelt's treatment of Native Americans with the admiration you have for him?
I don't. One thing I do in the book is put his flaws out there and just let them sit there. There's little good that you can say about his attitude overall toward Native Americans. He did become close to Native Americans who were in the Rough Riders. His ideas did evolve, but overall, it's one of those things where it's not in the plus column for Mr. Roosevelt. On the other hand, the book itself is about a confluence between a Native American ideal, that of Bears Ears National Monument, and the old park ideal. We used to call it America's best idea. I call it America's pretty good idea. But the idea of taking that old park idea and having it come together with Native ideals, which is exactly what was happening in Bears Ears, and with people like Regina Lopez White Skunk, is a thrilling one and a way to kind of redeem our idea of the land.
We're living through scary and uncertain times, with the rise of nationalism, COVID-19 and its fast fallout, and the accelerating climate change. What would have made Roosevelt, as opposed to the current administration, up to the task of this enormously difficult moment?
Well, Leave It As It Is the title of the book. It's also a good attitude toward the natural world. It applies to bats, too. We've uncovered, ripped apart so much of the natural world, and we've unleashed these viruses. Of course, if Roosevelt were in charge, he would respect science. He was a naturalist. He knew and trusted science. He was an emphatic and powerful leader. He would have was very comfortable going against popular opinion, and he would have simply led us through the crisis with the strong leadership he was famous for. I've often thought during these times how great it would be to have him in charge.
When you first planned this road trip in Roosevelt's shadow, what did you hope to learn and experience? What surprised you most?
I wanted to get back to a landscape that I'd loved when I was younger and where I'd spent a lot of time. I had contributed to a book that was given out to members of Congress about saving the land that became Bears Ears National Monument. And when Obama saved that land before he left office, I felt a sense of kind of elation and empowerment. Of course, that was ripped away when Trump undeclared that land. In fact, Ryan Zinke, then Secretary of the Interior, had made that declaration on October 27th, which was the 159th birthday of Teddy Roosevelt. And he did it standing in front of a portrait of Roosevelt. So on that day, at that moment, my trip was born. I decided I was going to head back out and I was going to follow Roosevelt and find out what he could offer us right now in our political landscape. I brought my nephew Noah as a graduation present from college, and I thought he'd want to learn about Roosevelt too. And I kept in mind this John Muir quote, which is, when you pick up anything in the universe, you find it hitched to everything else. That was particularly true when what you picked up was Teddy Roosevelt.
What does the idea of the American West mean to you? And does that idea match the reality? Did it ever?
The West for me has always been a landscape of hope, as it was for Roosevelt. He basically remade himself there after the loss of his wife and mother on the same day. Out in the Badlands, he kind of rebuilt himself. For me, I went west when I turned 30 after a bout with testicular cancer, and it stirred me back to life also. The reality of the West, though, as I learned, is quite different. Much of the land is cow-burnt. Cows seem to be the rulers. If you came down from outer space, you'd say, what's the deal with these cows? It's a wild, beautiful welfare state. The thing is, though, the land is so vast, and I end the book flying over it in a small plane, and I still believe in the geography of hope. I still believe that what's there can be more. I believe we can reclaim that land from the cows, and that, to me, is a stirring, exciting vision, and one that Roosevelt shared.